The Grand Hall of the Black-Silver Trade Guild was a battlefield without blood. The air was thick with the shouts of merchants, the frantic whispers of envoys from every race, the scratching of quills, and the desperate questions about the broken betrothal between Lady Varkasha Draymore and Lord Sadrin Blackthorn. Stock values, shipping contracts, investor confidence, and the northern trade routes were all plunging in free fall. No one said the empire was collapsing, but everyone could smell it. In the middle of that chaos, I was invisible. My name is Garen Vale, 35 years old widower, father to a 7-year-old girl named Mira. We lived in a rented 2-room house at the end of the craftsman's district. By day, I took any odd job I could find. By night, I cleaned the guild hall, polishing stages, fixing podiums, adjusting crystal amplifiers, and mending velvet curtains. No one knew that the man pushing the cleaning cart had once been the chief artificer at Celeste Forge. No one knew I had designed bone braces and breath valves made of star crystal that had saved hundreds of lives until a powerful pharmaceutical family stole my patents, dragged me through the courts, and crushed everything I had. My wife Alira didn't die from the heart condition she was born with. She died from the months of exhaustion fighting beside me against the lawsuits, the debts, and the public smears. On her last night, she held my hand and whispered, "Don't raise our daughter on bitterness. Live kindly, even when the world is not kind to you." So I buried my old name. I became nobody. It was the only way to keep Mira safe. That afternoon, I was kneeling at the edge of the main stage, tightening the base of a crystal microphone when the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. On the raised platform stood Varkasha Draymore, 32 ruler of the Black-Silver Empire, green-skinned, golden-eyed, and colder than winter steel. Her hand rested on the podium, but I was close enough to see it tremble. Just a fraction. Only someone who had learned to notice small things would have caught it. The betrothal to Sadrin Blackthorn had shattered 3 days ago. He hadn't just ended it. He had humiliated her in public, claiming she was unfit to lead. Stocks were crashing. Investors were panicking. Her enemies smelled blood. Then she looked down and saw me. Without warning, she stepped off the platform. The crowd parted like water before a blade. Assistants scrambled behind her, but she ignored them. Her long strides carried her straight to me. Before I could stand, her strong green fingers closed around my wrist and pulled me up against her. "Pretend to kiss me for 2 minutes," she whispered, lips almost brushing mine. "The rest, leave to me." My mind went blank. 2 heartbeats of pure shock. Then I saw it, raw desperation in those amber eyes. Not a game, not a whim. This was the final desperate throw of a woman about to be torn apart in her own hall. I made the choice before I could think. Instead of pulling away, I slid one hand to the small of her back, drew her closer, and kissed her. It wasn't a light brush. It was real, firm enough for the entire hall to believe it, gentle enough that she would never feel used. My other hand cupped her jaw thumb, brushing her cheek. For 2 full minutes, the world disappeared. The shouting stopped. The scratching of quills stopped. Hundreds of eyes stared in stunned silence as the most powerful orc in the northern continent was kissed by a nobody janitor in front of everyone. When I finally pulled back, her lips were slightly smudged with the faint color she wore, her breathing unsteady. But the panic in her eyes was gone, replaced by something sharp, controlled, and dangerous. She turned, took my hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and walked back up to the podium with me beside her. Only then did the noise explode. Gasps, murmurs, the frantic flipping of pages as every reporter rewrote their headlines on the spot. From Varkasha Draymore humiliated by Blackthorn to mysterious man kisses Orc CEO in front of entire guild. I stood there, heart hammering, still holding her hand, and understood with perfect clarity. In one kiss, the quiet life I had built for Mira and me had just been dragged straight into the eye of the storm. Immediately after the kiss, the hall erupted into chaos. Reporters were already shouting questions. Assistants swarmed the stage. But before I could slip away like I always did, a sharp-eyed orc woman in a tailored coat stepped in front of me. "Hannah," she introduced herself curtly. "Lady Varkasha's right hand. She wants to see you. Now." I didn't argue. 2 minutes ago, I had been invisible. Now every eye in the guild was tracking my every move. Hannah led me through service corridors I knew better than anyone, then up a private lift I had never been allowed to ride. The doors opened onto the top floor of Black Silver Tower. The air here was colder, quieter, scented faintly with star crystal and expensive tea. Varkasha's office was vast and sparse. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking the city. The only personal touches were a single folded letter on the desk and a cup of herbal tea gone cold. She stood by the window, still in the same severe black and silver gown from the stage. When the door closed behind me, she turned. The mask of the untouchable CEO was still in place, but her eyes were different now, tired, calculating, and something else I couldn't name. "Sit," she said. I stayed standing. "I'm not here for pleasantries." "Good, neither am I." She walked to her desk and leaned against it. Cedrin Blackthorn isn't just ending our betrothal. He's been buying up shares in secret for months. The moment the news broke, the price dropped. He plans to wait until panic peaks, then swallow the entire guild. My board is already whispering that I'm weak. They need a reason to believe I'm still in control. She looked at me directly. You are that reason. I almost laughed. A janitor. A man no one knows. A man with no faction, no debts, no scandals they can use against me. You're perfect because you're invisible until today. She paused. I had you investigated the moment I first noticed you fixing the amplifiers 6 months ago. You're Garen Vale, former master artificer at Celeste Forge. Widower. Single father to Mira, 7 years old. You lost everything when your designs were stolen. You chose silence to protect your daughter. That makes you useful. My stomach tightened. You investigated my daughter? I investigate everything that might make a man say no. Her voice softened by a fraction. I'm not proud of it, but I'm desperate. She laid out the terms without hesitation. For 2 weeks, I would appear at her side as the mysterious man who had kissed her in front of the entire guild. A quiet new relationship. She would create a cover for me, technical advisor from the western border brought in to improve the guild's medical mechanical division. In return, she would establish a full education trust for Mira School University, everything guaranteed until Mira turned 25. If I ever wanted to return to my real craft, she would clear the legal path and fund the workshop. I listened to every word. Then I gave her my conditions. Mira stays out of this completely. She never appears in public with you. She never hears politics. If anything threatens her safety or her peace, the deal ends instantly, and I keep my nights free to be her father. Varkasha studied me for a long moment. Agreed. That night, I walked home carrying a sealed envelope with the first documents already signed and a small pouch of coins for immediate expenses. My hands shook the entire way. Mira was waiting at our little wooden table practicing her letters by lamplight. When I stepped inside, still wearing the fine coat Hannah had given me, she tilted her head. Dad? Did you go to a play? I knelt, so we were eye to eye. I'm helping someone who's in trouble. A powerful person who needs the world to think she's not alone right now. Mira thought about it very seriously. Is she a good person? I remembered the tiny tremble in Varkasha's hand on the podium. She's trying to be. Mira nodded once satisfied. Then it's okay. Mom always said helping people is the best thing you can do. The next evening, I stood beside Varkasha at the Star Hall Gala. The same people who had sneered at me yesterday now stared openly. I wore the tailored clothes they had sent. I looked like someone who belonged until you noticed the calluses on my hands. Cedrin Blackthorn arrived halfway through the evening, smiling like a predator who had already won. He circled us slowly, voice dripping poison. So this is the new toy, a common laborer. How? Quaint. Tell me, Varkasha, does he polish your floors as well as he polishes your reputation? The room went still. I answered before she could. Actually, my lord, I fix things that are broken. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Cedrin's smile faltered for the first time. When the music started, Varkasha took my hand and pulled me onto the dance floor. She moved like someone born to command, but her grip on my shoulder was tight. You're not afraid, she asked quietly. I'm terrified, I admitted. Then why are you still here? Because right now you look more afraid than I feel. For one heartbeat, her golden eyes softened. It was the first time she looked at me like I was a person instead of a solution. And in that moment, standing under crystal chandeliers with an orc ruler in my arms while the entire elite of the city watched, I realized something dangerous. This fake kiss was no longer feeling fake at all. The days after the Star Hall Gala blurred into something I no longer recognized. Varkasha didn't announce anything. She simply began appearing in the small corners of my life. A sealed note slipped under my door at dawn, Mira's favorite honey cakes. Do not tell her it came from me. Another envelope a day later with exact measurements for the leaking roof and a crew that arrived at midnight so the neighbors wouldn't see. She never stayed long enough for conversation. She left the gifts and vanished like smoke. But Mira noticed everything. The first time Varkasha came in person, it was a rainy afternoon. She claimed she was passing by on guild business. Mira took one look at the tall orc in the doorway and decided she was the most interesting thing in the world. Within 10 minutes, my daughter had dragged her to the tiny kitchen table, shoved a half-burned honey cake into her hand, and demanded a story about dragons. Varkasha told one. Her voice was low and steady, but I caught the way her golden eyes softened when Mira laughed at the part where the dragon tripped over its own tail. After that, Mira started calling her Ko Varkasha, with the kind of certainty only 7-year-olds possess. She braided Varkasha's long black hair with clumsy fingers and declared the result the best warrior braid ever. Varkasha let her. She even carried Mira on one arm while helping me move a heavy crate as if the girl weighed nothing. One evening, while Mira was drawing at the table, she looked up and said the sentence that nearly stopped my heart. "Dad looks less sad when he's with you." Varkasha froze mid-sip of tea. I nearly dropped the bowl I was holding. Mira just went back to coloring like she hadn't said something that cracked the air in half. That night, after Mira fell asleep, Varkasha stayed longer than usual. We sat on the narrow porch under the single lantern. Rain drummed on the tin roof she had secretly repaired. "You don't have to keep doing this," I said quietly. "The notes, the food, the roof. I know the deal was only public appearances." She stared into the rain. "I know, but your daughter asked me today if I like honey cakes. I realized I've never been asked that before. Not once in 32 years. I told her about Alira then, about the stolen designs, the long court battles, the way my wife fought until her body gave out." Varkasha listened without interrupting. When I finished, she spoke so softly I almost missed it. "My mother was a low clerk. My father died when I was 9. I climbed every rung of this guild by being colder and sharper than everyone around me. I thought that was strength." She looked at me. "You and Mira make me wonder if I was wrong. Our fake relationship stopped feeling fake somewhere between the honey cakes and the late-night talks. We appeared together at guild events, charity galas, even a mechanical exhibition where I actually got to speak about medical devices again. The city ate up every rumor, but the real moments happened in my tiny house when Varkasha would sit on the floor helping Mira with arithmetic, or when she would lean against the kitchen counter watching me cook, or when our hands brushed while passing plates and neither of us pulled away. Cedrin struck on a Thursday morning. He called a press conference outside the guild steps and released a carefully twisted version of my past. He claimed I had stolen the star crystal designs myself, that Alira's death was the result of my reckless ambition, that I was using Varkasha the same way. Every dirty detail was polished into a weapon. My old name was dragged into the light and spat on. By afternoon, the whispers had reached Mira's school. When I picked her up, she was crying in the corner of the classroom. A parent had told her father was a thief and that the orc lady would abandon us the moment it became inconvenient. I carried my daughter home in the rain. She clung to my neck and whispered, "Is it true, Dad? Are we going to be alone again?" That night, I sat at the table long after Mira slept. I wrote Varkasha a letter by hand. I told her I understood the pressure on her. I told her I didn't blame her. I told her the hardest part wasn't losing the guild or the money, it was that for a few weeks, Mira and I had started believing we could have something real again. I left the letter at the guild's private entrance before dawn. The next day, the board summoned Varkasha. They gave her an ultimatum: end the relationship or lose their support. They didn't ask if she loved me. They only asked how much the guild was worth. I waited for her answer. She never gave one. She simply stopped coming. No more notes. No more visits. No more quiet evenings on the porch. The silence that followed felt heavier than any press conference. I understood. I had always understood. She was the ruler of an empire. I was a janitor who had kissed her once in public. Some lines were never meant to be crossed. Still, when I tucked Mira into bed that night, she asked the question I had no answer for. "Dad, did we do something wrong?" I kissed her forehead and lied the way only parents can. "No, sweetheart, we didn't do anything wrong." But as I sat alone in the dark kitchen, staring at the empty chair where Varkasha had once sat, I realized the truth. The fake relationship had become real, and now it was over. The severance was swift and brutal. The next morning, before I even reached the service entrance, Hannah was waiting with a sealed envelope and 2 security guards. My access card no longer worked. My cleaning cart had already been removed. The fine coat they had given me for the gala was taken back without a word. 3 years of invisible labor erased in under 5 minutes. I walked out of Black Silver Tower carrying nothing but the small wooden box that held my old tools, the ones I had kept hidden in the basement. The same tools I once used to build devices that saved lives. Now they felt like relics from a man who no longer existed. Mira was waiting at home when I returned early. She took one look at my face and knew. "They fired you because of her, didn't they?" I couldn't lie to her. I nodded. That afternoon, I picked her up from school and found her sitting alone on the steps, eyes red. Someone's parent had shown her the headlines on a crystal slate: "Janitor exposed, Garenvale thief and fraud." They had twisted every detail. My stolen designs became proof I was the criminal. Alira's death was painted as the tragic result of my greed. The words were sharp enough to cut a child. Mira didn't cry in front of me. She just held my hand tighter than usual and whispered, "I told them you're not a thief." But they laughed. That night, she fell asleep, clutching the little pouch Varkasha had once left for her. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring at the empty chair where Varkasha used to sit. Then I wrote the letter. I didn't accuse her. I didn't beg. I simply told her I understood the pressure from the board, that I didn't hate her, that the hardest part wasn't losing the job or the money, it was that for a few short weeks, Mira and I had started to believe we could have a real family again. I ended it with Elira's words. If there ever comes a moment when you can live as yourself, don't choose what is convenient. I delivered it to the private guild entrance before dawn and walked away. For 3 days, I took any labor job I could find loading crates at the river docks far from the guild district. The pay was half what I had earned cleaning. The hours were longer, but at least no one there knew my name yet. Mira grew quieter. She stopped asking about Varkasha. She stopped drawing pictures of the three of us together. She just hugged me tighter at night and asked if we were going to be alone again. I told her no. I lied. Meanwhile, inside Black Silver Tower, something was burning. I didn't know it at the time, but Varkasha had read my letter the moment it arrived. Hana told me later that she had locked herself in her office for 6 straight hours. When she emerged, the cold mask was gone. In its place was pure controlled fury. She opened every sealed archive she possessed. She called back former clerks Cedrin had dismissed. She bought old ledgers, recovered recordings, and dug up transfer documents proving that Cedrin had orchestrated the theft of my designs years ago. She found proof he had deliberately prolonged the court case until Elira broke. She found the payments he had made to silence witnesses. 3 days after I sent the letter, Varkasha called a second press conference. This time she stood alone on the stage. No board members beside her, no advisors, just her, the podium, and a stack of documents thick enough to serve as an execution order. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She laid everything bare. She exposed Cedrin's secret share purchases. She revealed how he had manufactured the betrothal crisis to crash the guild's value. She played recordings of him boasting about stealing my work and laughing about Elira's death. And then in front of the entire city, she said the words that stopped every reporter's pen: Garen Vale is not a thief. He is the man whose life was stolen, and he is the man I love. Not for convenience, not for politics. I love him because when the entire world told him to become bitter, he chose kindness instead. The hall exploded. The board tried to remove her that same hour. They called an emergency vote. They threatened to strip her authority. But the city had already turned. Investors who had been ready to sell suddenly bought more shares. Citizens who had mocked her now cheered her name. Cedrin's assets were frozen by royal order before sunset. I learned all of this later from frantic whispers at the docks and the evening crystal broadcasts. I was sitting on the porch with Mira when the first reports came through the neighbor's window. Mira heard Varkasha's voice saying my name and looked up at me with wide eyes. "Dad." She said she loves you. I didn't know what to say. My chest felt too tight to breathe. Because while Varkasha was burning her empire to the ground to protect my name, I had already packed our bags. I had already decided to disappear again for Mira's sake. I had already accepted that some loves were too dangerous to keep. But the world, it seemed, had other plans. And somewhere in the tower, the woman who had once asked me to pretend for 2 minutes had just chosen to fight for real. The rain that day was merciless, the kind that turned the streets of the capital into rivers and made every lantern flicker like it was about to give up. I was walking Mira home from her community lesson umbrella broken on one side when I saw her. Varkasha Draymore stood in front of the school gate soaked to the bone. No guards, no carriage, no crown of power. Just her green skin glistening under the downpour, golden eyes fixed on us like we were the only 2 people left in the world. Mira saw her first. Ko Varkasha. My daughter broke free from my hand and ran straight through the puddles, crashing into Varkasha's legs with the fearless certainty only a child can have. "I knew you would come back. I told Dad you would." Varkasha dropped to one knee in the mud, arms wrapping around Mira as if the girl might vanish. Rain streamed down her face, mixing with something that looked suspiciously like tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered against Mira's wet hair. "I'm so sorry I stayed away." I walked up slowly, heart hammering harder than it had during that first kiss in the guild hall. She looked up at me, soaked, exhausted, and for the first time, completely without armor. "I read your letter," she said. Her voice was raw, every word, and I realized I had spent my whole life choosing what was convenient for the guild. Never for myself, never for anyone who mattered. She stood still, holding Mira's hand. "So I burned it all down. Cedrin is finished. The board can scream, but they can't touch me anymore. I chose you, both of you, if you'll still have me." The rain kept falling. Mira looked between us, eyes shining with hope. "Dad," she asked quietly, "can we be a real family now?" Not pretend. I looked at Varkasha, the woman who had once commanded empires and now stood in the rain with nothing left but her choice. I thought of Elira's words. I thought of every night Mira had asked if we would be alone again. I stepped forward, pulled Varkasha close, and kissed her under the storm. Not for show, not for 2 minutes, for real. "Yes," I said against her lips. "Real this time. No contracts, no performances, just us." We didn't move into the tower. We found a house on the edge of the city, instead small garden-wide kitchen room for Mira's drawing, space for my workbench, and a corner where Varkasha could grow the herbs she had only ever read about in books. I reopened my old craft under my real name. The guild returned my patents. The designs that had been stolen were mine again, and I used them to build the Alira Foundation free medical devices for any child who needed them. Varkasha stepped down from the highest seat of Black Silver. She kept a smaller role advising from the shadows, but her real work became something quieter. She taught Mira how to braid hair the orc way. She learned how to burn honey cakes just the way my daughter liked them. She sat on the porch with me after Mira went to bed and told me stories of her childhood I had never heard before. Some nights, she still woke from nightmares about the old power struggles. I held her until the shaking stopped. Mira grew up between us. She learned that family isn't about blood or titles. It's about the people who choose to stay, even when the world tries to pull them apart. Years later, when strangers asked how her parents met, she always answered with the same proud smile. It started with a fake kiss that turned real. And then Dad chose Mom again, and Mom chose us back. That was the truth. We never became perfect. We carried scars, mine from the courts, hers from the throne, Mira's from the days she thought she would lose us both. But every morning I woke up to the sound of Varkasha making breakfast while Mira laughed at her terrible jokes, and I knew we had built something stronger than any empire. We built a home. And in the end, that was the only title that ever mattered.